thank you for coming. Thank you for braving the elements. And we appreciate you coming out to talk about future and future plans and how do we organize that and make that all come together. Our format tonight is we're going to have 4 different presentations, and then we're going to just have a few minutes for questions right after each presentation. And then people will stay around if you have questions after the 4 presentations, but just so that we don't hold up the entire presentation with too many questions, if that's okay. First up, I would like to introduce Katie Lesko. She's going to talk about 4-year colleges, and she is currently at the Sage Colleges. And I'm going to work the computer.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and braving the weather. I appreciate it. My name is Katie Lesko. I work at Russell Sage College, and I work with undergraduate, graduate, and financial aid. So I have a little bit of an overview that way. I think in where you are right now, some of the best information I can give you is kind of how colleges do their thing. You might remember 10% of what I say, maybe 2% of what I say if you're like my husband, but you will remember something, and then you're going to be able to take that as you're planning. So 10th grade is a great year to have this presentation, in part because you're going to take some of the pieces away, and it's from the perspective of the college, not from the student, but I think we can get to both of those places at the end. So ideally, what you're going into when you go through a college process is you're creating a list, right? At the end of the day, you're going to create a list, and you're going to put that list of colleges together. Sometimes you put the list on it because your uncle went there. Sometimes you put the list on it because your best friend's looking at it. Sometimes, if you're like my nephew, you put just things on the list that makes no sense at all, but that's okay, right? And so you're just starting to add that list. Each of the colleges have requirements and criteria that you'll put together what they call an application packet. So your application packet has different parts to the application. The colleges review that application, and then that's how they make the decisions. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the parts and kind of where you are now to understand what you still can affect and what you can't affect. And then I have a couple case studies that we'll talk about. Just really brief, really simple, but it highlights some of this information here. So the first thing I want you to walk away with is kind of that framework of how to match up to a college. So you're going to put your list together, and the colleges have 3 fits. They have an academic fit, right? It's your profile. So your GPA, your SATs, your transcripts, classes you've taken, things along those lines will add to your academic profile. And that's going to match to the college in one of 3 ways. The first way it's going to match is, are you a mid 50% student? So your averages match up to their mid 50%, college's mid 50%. That means that you're a match, right? That means you're a good fit for that school. If you apply to a college where your academics are in the top 25% of who gets in, that means that it's a likely school for you. Right, so your GPA is a 95, the college normally accepts an 88, that sort of, your higher academic profile is higher than the college that you're looking at. That's going to be a likely school. Or if you're in the bottom 25% of who gets in, that means that that's a reach college for you. Right, so if you look at your academics, and I know you're only a sophomore, but your academics are starting to form. Right, your classes that you're taking, the grades that you're getting, that's going to start to either catapult you into some way, or this for the students in the room, or a different place. And so that if you're in the bottom 25% of who gets in, you might have to do some different things to make your application stand out, or to do something, that you can make the relationship with the school the admissions counselors, things along those lines. So the key to the framework of the college process is, I'm going to put colleges on my list. I think everybody kind of knows that's the part, right? This fake this that you put together, or it becomes real at some point. But though you have to know how you fit academically to the college that you're applying to. If you do that, you start to set expectations of understanding, will I get in or won't I? And then you won't be as surprised, right? So if you start to put that list together and understand how academic it is. Sorry about that. I put my timer on because I know I want to go faster than normal. And so the academic fit is about your classes, what major, things along those lines. The colleges also have a social fit, so you might want a large school, and that's a social fit for you. You want a lot of things to do. You want to be in a city. It's all of those types of social things that you do now for the students, and you're starting to get a feel for those things. Maybe there's a certain club that you want to be a part of, and you really love that club in high school, and you want to carry that interest with you in college. So that social fit really does matter. That's how students feel comfortable, and they're able to take advantage of all the opportunities that colleges present. The last fit is a financial fit, and we'll learn that later from the financial aid perspective, but the idea is that college is an investment, and so is this the best investment for the family? And how do you decide that, and what goes into those types of conversations? And so if you take that framework, that academic fit, the social fit, and the financial fit, it starts to become clear which college might be a great option for you. And the beginning part of this process is looking at more than you'll apply to, right? So you're gonna have a larger list, and then you start to whittle it down as you do the visits and different things. What goes into the application that you're gonna start to build is the transcript. So we see the classes that you've taken. So the student will see the freshman year, the sophomore year, the junior year, and we see from the college perspective, we see the grade at the end of this year. And I always make sure I say that to people, because sometimes students get really upset about one test. And colleges don't see that one test. They see the grade at the end of the year, which is 4 quarters and the whole picture. So it really does matter when you're thinking about really being stressed out. It's not about just one of the pieces. It's about doing your homework on time. It's about, going for extra help if you need it. It's about studying for the test. So it's about all of that. That's what a grade is. And colleges will look at that grade. We see the freshman year, end of year grades, sophomore year, end of year grades, junior year, end of year grades, and then a lot of times we just see, when you apply, we'll just see the senior year classes, like what you're planning to take. That'll become important later. So we see what you're planning to take. We evaluate those academics, we see trends. It goes up, it goes down, maybe there's reasons for that, and we read the essay and we find out a little bit more about why that might happen. We read the recommendations. That recommendation might be a school counselor, it might be a teacher, it might be a coach. So all of those pieces, the application, the transcript, the essay, letters of recommendation, testing if the college expects testing, and then your interest in your activities. It goes into a folder. They're electronic now. Back in my day, they were paper. But it goes into a folder, and we read through all of those pieces. And essentially, we're trying to figure out, as a college, we cast a net of acceptances, trying to figure out who's going to best benefit from our institution. Doesn't matter if it's a highly selective or a not as selective institution, that's the point. When we accept you, we say, you can succeed if you come here and, and become whatever the college motto is, right? But that's the point of a college acceptance. We're saying you can succeed here. There's resources, there's opportunities, things that you can take advantage of to graduate, because that's the point. This is how I stay on time. So the next piece is really just to give you, as a sophomore, some of the questions that you might want to ask yourself. And I use this in an essay slide because people always ask about the essay. But in the concept of a college process, you should start thinking about what makes me excited, right? Who am I? What matters to me, right? How do I communicate that to someone else? What's your hobbies? What do you do for fun? I always say the story of my good friend from high school is an English teacher, but she loved drama. And so for all those years ago, she's been teaching drama and English, and that was part of what she did for fun, right? But it actually forced her to look at colleges that had really strong theater programs. And so those are the types of things that you don't even realize can help you narrow the search. because you might want to be an engineer, but you still might want to be in the theater. And so how do you take some of these interests and how do you take some of these opportunities to then help you with the search? Most of the time people put the search down of things that they didn't do the research yet, they just knew the name, right? So it's part of this is actually doing the research. But that's just some of the questions that you'll have to think about. The resources of where I got those are on the bottom, and I know the slide deck is going to get shared to you. So the next thing, slide, if you could, is about the case studies. And I think these sometimes are a little bit more powerful for why I'm talking about it the way I'm talking about it. So essentially when we talk about the academic fit, the social fit, and then the financial fit isn't part of the review for need-blind colleges, which is most colleges. They don't look at your finances. Some do, and we can ask that question if you want to know more. But ideally, it's the academic fit and the social fit. That's what's happening within the application review. So say we have a nursing student. So when we're reading the application, we look at that transcript. That nursing student has an English class their senior year. They have Algebra 2 Trig. They have history. They have environmental science, no foreign language, because they've already completed their core for foreign language. And then they have a GPA of an 88, an 83, so something happened sophomore year. Junior year is a 90, so they picked it back up, right? So now you see like, okay, what are they doing? What are they working on? Senior year grades of an 85, that's great, right? In those classes. No chemistry. Why would that matter? Nursing, pharmaceuticals, right? So you have a science student, this nursing major, but they didn't take the curriculum that nursing colleges typically are looking for, associate's degrees or bachelor's degrees. But their social fit, student government, works at a grocery store, lacrosse player, visited campus. So you've got this really interested student and they're learning the essays about grandma living with them, being diagnosed with cancer. We get that a lot, and that's why they want to go into nursing. It makes sense. That's their motivation. The recommendation talks about them being a helping person. This is a hard one. The major and the personality are really hard for college admissions sometimes because you need to have the science for science programs, and nursing is a science program. But we know there's a caring gene piece to it. So a lot of times in most, more selective institutions, the student might not get in because chemistry could be a deal breaker. In other situations, the student we could call and say, tell me more about why you want to do nursing. Right? Have you looked at other majors to be a helping profession? What else you've been in government, you've worked, like what else are you looking at? And so to me, this person, if they were doing the college search as a sophomore, they might have been able to fit chemistry in that senior year. And so that's why this slide to me is a powerful case study, because it's about, I want a certain major, and how do I make those choices early, like you're all here, in order to be better prepared for the major that I'm interested in. Because some of those things really are deal breakers. Now, they could take a summer class, they could do a conditional admissions if that college really wanted the student to come through. But there's other students that did fix their curriculum earlier and they took chemistry. So that's where the competitiveness sometimes of a college program happens. Not to stress you out at all, but the idea is that you're here and you're not gonna be stressed because you're looking at this stuff early. Right? But those choices, the majors that you have, colleges are gonna look specifically for those types of majors. Another thing that a college will do is switch that student to like an undecided major. And so they can come in and get more time and try to get into the nursing program a little bit later or things along those lines. And they'll communicate to the student if they do something like that. That's for later on for you to worry about. But essentially what this means is that this is a really strong student. But we want to make sure that the curriculum matches, because we know students who take chemistry are stronger nursing students. They're more prepared for the sciences that they will get. And so the decisions that admissions criteria come, when we set up admissions criteria, they come from a place of research, and they come from a place in the admissions world for the college as a place of success. This is the profile it takes for the student to be successful. The next one, and then I think the next one. So bio. This student has English, pre-calc, history, no science, marketing, Spanish in college. Their GPA is a 95, a 90, an 83. Senior grade's a 95. So they had a tough year too in that junior year. Most likely, maybe it was Algebra 2 Trig, maybe it was just honors classes and language. Business club president, babysits the sister after school. Music, works at the local garden store. Essay about a game-winning catch. Athletics essays come through. Students is always asking about marketing books and an interest in why some of the businesses work, right? So they're always just looking at business, figuring out business. They talk to the recommendation was from a faculty member about wanting marketing books. What is odd on this slide? Bio, right? But the profile's business. So here's a couple storylines. Who do you think filled out the app? Not the student, maybe, right? Mom who wants a doctor in the house, right? Something like that. So it could be that. Could be as simple as that. Mom fills it out because they're like, oh, of course they want bio, right? Something along those lines. It could be a misstep, right? So bio, business. Alphabetically, it goes in line, right? So they could have just checked the box. I mean, how many people checked the wrong box, right? And then submitted to. This illustrates how we look at the whole thing. So one of the things I can never stress enough is it is a packet, and all of the pieces of the information tell a story. And so as you're going through this process, you're learning more about your story. And when I see things that don't necessarily match up, I get to work at colleges, smaller schools, where we can call and say, hey, you put bio down. Did you really mean that? More selective institutions, larger volumes of institutions might not be able to do that. And so going through the process, understanding what's your story, what's your profile, and then being able to make sure you're connecting, that you're checking the right box and profiling, proofreading well, allows you to have the most opportunities. And that's what this is about, the most opportunities, so then that way you can find a school that makes the most sense for you. But these are some highlights and some tidbits of things that we've seen students do. And we just want to help be able to share that information so you won't do it, right? I'm going to end it there. I think the next slide is questions. So does anyone have questions for me? And if not, I will be around. So after financial aid goes, we can answer some of these together as well. Yes. Sure. Speak to that. So the question was when parents before you come and tell you the story about how colleges really have a value and an importance on activities that you've done in high school. How important are the activities that you've done in high school? How important is that to the evaluation process of the application? So every student has their own story, and when colleges talk about the importance of the activities that you've done, what they're really talking about is where do you spend your time, and are you spending your time productively? So sometimes the activities that you'll see are traditional extracurricular activities in high school. We'll see clubs and organizations students have joined. Sometimes what happens is you'll see students work after school, and that's where their passion is. That is the same as other activities as well. You're showing leadership, you're showing accountability to other people, and that's why I put babysitting, right? The student babysits the sister, and we see that. So it's about how do you fill your time? How do you become accountable to someone that's other than your parents? How do you organize a group? How do you show either leadership skills or followership skills? Sometimes you just need people to join things, right? That you can, other people lead and you're a part of that school spirit or whatever it could be. So there's a value placed on it. It doesn't outweigh academic fit. So academic fit will always come first. It's the larger piece because you want to make sure they're academically situated. But what we're doing is looking for success factors, essentially, things that you've done in whatever profile that you've put together as a student of outside of your academics, how you spend your time. That helps us know that you're ready to come into our community and spend time doing something else. So that's really what they're looking for. There's no prescription to it. It's not specific, you have to be class president, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, or you have to be so involved that you lose your academics, because I promise you academics lead the decision. But colleges do want to bring in people who will take advantage of their community, and we can see if you're taking advantage of the community that you're in right now, then you're able to take advantage of the community that you come to when you come to college. I would also say it helps students when you're invested in your surroundings. It just shows that you're able to be adjusted and working towards something else, and so there's just non-cognitive factors that help. Truly what we want to do is graduate students. So those types of evaluations connect to the graduation rates, and we know that that helps build the student's skill set. Yeah. Sure. So the question that came out is that if you take an honors class, is it better to take an honors class and get a higher or lower grade than it is to take a regular class and get a higher grade? And that's how I normally get the question asked. And I always say it's better to take the honors and APs and get the A, because then there's no question. What that means is I can't give a student permission not to do their best. So if a student's really talented and they're applying to more selective schools, really competitive schools, then most likely that profile should be a mix of highly AP classes or college classes, things like that. If a student, depending on that academic fit, if the college doesn't expect all those classes, but a student wants to challenge themselves and take those classes, it's a great opportunity to try to challenge this, to challenge yourself while you're in a safe environment in high school, right? While you're learning year-round and you can learn how to study differently. I think at the end of the day, I will always advocate for students to be in the curriculum that makes them successful and challenges them themselves. For some students, that's 5 APs. For other students, that's just traditional coursework. I think if you can take advantage of an honors class or an AP class just to try something different and you're doing well, and you get a B, colleges will say that's great. So it's about, did you change the way you studied? Because most students that go into those classes don't realize it's actually about absorbing the information differently. They go into it thinking I can do the same thing that always got me an A. But they can't. You have to review your notes before you go into class, like you do in college, right? You're a better student in college if you review your notes before you go to class and you don't cram studying the night before. There's also, and I give permission to students to say, I don't want to take that class. I feel like there's also sometimes a pressure that you're supposed to in an unhealthy kind of sometimes way, and that comes from peer pressure too. And so I think it's important for all of us to say, does that make sense? School counselors know this better than I ever could, and they've seen it. And so talking to them through if the student should be taking those honors classes, if they should be, in those spaces is really important, because they understand the whole context plus what the plan after college will be for students. But I do think that the answer is taking the curriculum that fits the best for you with what the expectations of your college planning are. I hope that helps a little bit. Also, you do have to open the book.
I bet we could ask Katie
Yes.
questions all night and she would stay here and
And I
answer.
will.
So
So
she
I'll
will
maybe
stay
later.
until the end. But right now, we want to move on just so that we can get you all of this information and not have to bring you your pajamas. So Jared Foro, if you would come up and talk about National Honor Society, that would be great.
Excellent. Thanks, Amy. I'm Jared Foro. I'm a member of the faculty here in the science department. I teach I have to correct myself, Earth and Space Science, new curriculum this year. And I have been advising the National Honor Society here for quite some time, going on 10 years now. We do have two advisors here at Guilderland High School. The other advisor, also a member of the science department, Alex Nealis. She's one of our chemistry teachers. She was just appointed as the other NHS advisor this week, so I lost my longtime co-advisor to another district at the end of last school year, despite my protests. She decided to move anyway to a different district. Alex was just appointed this week, and I didn't want the first thing I said, hey, we have a presentation at 6:30 Wednesday night. I didn't want to scare her off that fast. So Alex and I do run the chapter together. She's getting up to speed as we're getting going. So here's what I'm hoping to cover tonight. Just I want to touch on all of these things. What does recruitment look like for the National Honor Society? What does it mean to be a member in our chapter of the National Honor Society? And what's the ideal candidate that we look for? One of the common questions that we get, probably the most common question, is when do I apply for NHS? And that's a fair question, right? But it is not worded correctly. The next slide uses that word application, and then if you have one more key, we don't use that term at all. The word application implies that everybody has an equal chance of being accepted as a member of the National Honor Society, and that's not the case. So you'll see on our literature and on our chapter website, for example, we never use the term application. That word is not in our vocabulary. We use the term instead information packet. Students who are eligible to join the National Honor Society will submit an information packet, much like a packet when you apply to a four-year school, that encompasses a lot more than you might expect. So students who are eligible to pursue membership get notified when they're a junior. Now there's the national organization that National Honor Society falls underneath. They have very broad guidelines for what the National Honor Society is, and then individual chapters can't loosen those guidelines any further than they're loosened, but they can tighten those guidelines up, right? So one of the stipulations that we have here in this school, might be different in other schools, is that you don't get into the National Honor Society until you are a junior. You're not eligible to even submit information for candidacy until you're a junior. And that's pretty typical of larger schools like this one. Any student who is eligible gets notified in January of their junior year. So this is why I'm here at 10th grade parent night, because this is something that will happen for many students in the 10th grade about a year from now. When we get back from the holiday break in a few weeks, that's our recruitment season will kick off. The current juniors who are candidates for the National Honor Society will be notified, and we'll start communicating with them about what to do if they're interested in becoming a member. GPA is one of the criteria for potential membership in the National Honor Society. Our chapter requires a minimum cumulative GPA of 90.00. The national basement is an 85. Again, that's as low as we could ever go. That's as low as any National Honor Society chapter could ever go. But again, we can be more strict with the guidelines. We can't just be less strict with the guidelines. So here in Guilderland, our minimum GPA threshold is 90. I have heard of other schools having a threshold as high as a 98, believe it or not. A lot of schools are in like the 92, 95 range, as a matter of fact. GPA for us is cumulative. It is also unweighted. And cumulative, of course, meaning it takes all high school grades into account. So yes, those freshman year classes do count. Sophomore year classes count as well. In the first quarter of junior year, those classes also count, right? We won't have second quarter grades yet at the time of candidacy for junior year. So you're basically looking at 2 full years plus the first quarter of junior year is what goes into that GPA calculation, right? Rounding is not permitted. That's a national office guideline. So yes, even if your cumulative GPA is 89.99, you do not qualify for the National Honor Society. It has to be 90 or better. The national office does not allow us to round in any way, shape, or form. So GPA is one requirement to be a candidate. The other one is community service. In order to be eligible to pursue membership in the National Honor Society, students have to have completed a minimum of 20 hours of qualifying community service by the time they become a junior is what I would recommend. The firm deadline is November 15th of junior year. So for sophomores right now who might be out there saying, I have zero community service, this is your be very transparent. This is one of 2 warnings you'll get from an NHS advisor that you need to do community service in order to be eligible for the National Honor Society. We put this out here on a night like tonight, and also towards the end of this school year, probably like right at the end of the school year during Regents Week, all sophomores will get an email from me saying, hey, congratulations on almost finishing your sophomore year. As you start to think about junior year, one of the things that might be on your radar is National Honor Society, and we say in that email, one of the requirements besides GPA is community service. We purposely do not constantly send reminders about the community service requirement because, to be perfectly honest, we're looking for students who have an intrinsic motivation to serve their community, not students who are looking to get community service just so they can get into National Honor Society, right? So this is one place of 2 places students will ever hear about the community service requirement unless they do their own research ahead of time. That other word that is in bold up there, qualifying, the national office doesn't allow us to use certain hours, and there's some hours that we traditionally here in Guilderland say, hey, we're not counting that towards the National Honor Society eligibility. Okay, we get students every year that say, I did 100 hours of babysitting my little sister. That's not community service. That's you being an older sibling. You should babysit your little sister, right? Every winter, I shovel my grandmother's driveway. That's not you doing community service. That's you being a good grandchild to your grandmother. You should shovel your grandmother's driveway, right? That's not community service, right? Another big one that we see every year that is sometimes surprising for people, a lot of students participate in JVC programs or CIT programs, counselor and training programs. Those do not qualify as eligible community service for us. Why? Because they provide a clear benefit to students in those programs. Students in those programs very frequently, at the end of those volunteer programs, they get a job as a counselor, right? That's not community service. That's benefiting you, right? There's a document that's linked to our chapter website that talks about the 6 criteria for qualifying community service, but those are some of the big ones, right? And of course, in order to be eligible for community service hours, you can't receive any compensation. A conversation that we have with students very frequently is that money is not the only form of compensation, right? I can recall a student a few years ago who ran a scoreboard for a team. I think it was a summer baseball league, and she got dinner every night for doing that, and that was compensation, right? So we couldn't count that as community service, right? So those 2 big requirements, GPA and community service. Okay, so if a student meets both of those criteria and they're interested in pursuing membership with the National Honor Society, I already mentioned the information packets, they will get instructions at the time of their candidacy on how to access the information packet, how to fill it out, help filling it out if they need it, and of course, what the timeline will be, like when is all this stuff due by and when am I going to find out, right? A lot of times people will ask us questions, you know, are you going to accept the student into National Honor Society? A big misconception is that I decide who gets into National Honor Society. I have no say whatsoever. Who gets in to National Honor Society and who doesn't. The national office, the National Constitution requires us to have a panel of 5 long tenured faculty members that have been here in the building for quite some time. They're also community members for quite some time, understand the tradition of National Honor Society in this community. They review all of that information confidentially, meaning that no identifiable information is in the information that's received, right? So none of these members of the faculty council are like, oh, look, this is so-and-so's information, right? That information is not right out there in the public because we want a confidential process. Sometimes they decide to meet with those candidates if they have any questions. So very commonly when they're reviewing that information, they want to meet with the student and ask them certain questions depending on what they've submitted. And it's ultimately those 5 people, at least 3 of them need to vote for membership in order for a student to be offered membership. We use my previous co-advisor that I mentioned. I was still a little bit disappointed she left for another district. We spent a great deal of time just a few years ago developing a rubric for the faculty council to use. That is also on our chapter website. So it's very transparent what the criteria are that the faculty council look for. And I think it's a 30-point rubric, if I'm not mistaken. In order to be offered membership, a candidate has to get at least 23 points on the rubric. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure those are the numbers. Am I gonna, 30? Is it 30? Yes. Yeah, I think that's correct, right? Okay, the 4 pillars of the National Honor Society is what we as advisors tell the faculty council to always have in the back of their mind when they're going over candidates' information packets. The 4 pillars of the National Honor Society are character, scholarship, leadership, and service. We advise our candidates, if you become a candidate, you've already shown that you excel in the scholarship pillar, right? You have a GPA that's 90 or better. You excel in that pillar. You exemplify those characteristics. If you have done at least 20 hours of qualifying community service, you're also showing evidence that you are committed to that pillar of the National Honor Society. So the information packet is mostly focused on the other 2 pillars, character and leadership, right? And I'm going to talk just very briefly about what character and leadership mean to the National Honor Society. I won't read this to you, but character, we look into things like, does a student have a discipline record? Has the student ever been written up for academic integrity, plagiarism? That's a big one for character, right? Discipline is an indicator of character, but of course it's not the only indicator. I see several people taking pictures of this, feel free, right? This is also, publicly available information, right? So what you would expect for people of outstanding character, right, that we're looking for. The next one I believe is leadership, right? That's fine, I know it's slow. Oops, one back. Yep. And again, leadership. That's how the National Office of the National Honor Society defines what leadership is, so that is what we share with our faculty council to look for. This is what we suggest students focus on in their information packet if they're trying to become a member of the National Honor Society. Right, so what happens, I think the next slide, students who are offered membership, they will find out no later than March 1st. It usually is the week after the February break is when we try to send out final decisions, but we say no later than March 1st just in case, February we could have a blizzard, for example, right? And that process might get delayed. We always hold some form of induction ceremony in March. It is usually, we've moved this all around the calendar in my tenure. Amy's laughing because she knows, to try to find a time that conflicts with the least amount of stuff. I think we've landed on the week in March that is the week after winter sports ends and the week before spring sports begins. Seems to be an okay downtime. So that is our plan for this year and going forward for some time in March. Of course, when students are members, they're still expected to uphold the 4 pillars that I've already mentioned. And as a member of the National Honor Society, you have to complete at least 40 additional hours of community service. Once you're a member of the National Honor Society, we have ongoing opportunities that are available towards this 40 hours, but students definitely find some of these 40 hours on their own. Part of that 40 membership requirement is to plan and conduct your own individual service project. We call it an ISP for short. So every member of the National Honor Society has to identify something that they want to address in the local community, school community, broader community, and plan their own project to address that need in the community. So part of that 40 hours has to be the completion of the ISP. So I know that's a lot of information. Like Katie said, you might remember 10% of what I said. But this last slide, so what do we recommend in the short term from the advisors? X2Vol is an online service tracking platform that we contract with for community service. We recommend even freshmen coming into the high school to set up an X2Vol account so they can start logging community service hours towards their eligibility goal. So when they become a junior and all of a sudden they're a candidate, they don't just have 2 weeks to try to get all of their hours put into this account. If you continue as you go, then it's a lot easier, right? Participate in community service as time allows. You can go all the way back to the summer after you graduated 8th grade. You have until November 15th of your junior year to get at least 20 hours. Of course, the more hours you have, the stronger of a candidate you are. But as time allows, we recommend that you participate in community service opportunities. Trying to do that in the first quarter of your junior year because you all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, I haven't done any community service and this is NHS year, right? That can be tricky, right? A big warning that I have for everybody is look out for the pay-to-play National Honor Societies. There are a lot of organizations out there that will solicit students and families alike with the subject line of an email or a mailing being, hey, join the National Honor Society. It's only $100, right? Honor Society, right? There's only one National Honor Society. It is run through the National Association of Secondary School Principals, NASSP. NHS is an umbrella of that organization. Student government is also another umbrella of that organization. The National Junior Honor Society that some students might have participated in Farnsworth is another umbrella, right? If there's any questions about solicitation that you might be getting, is this a legit honor society? You can contact us, right? Contact one of the advisors, right? That is something that we find is happening more and more as well. Our chapter website, I've alluded to it a couple times. We recommend that students bookmark our chapter website. It's found through the larger Guilderland website, and they can reference it as they go throughout their high school career. I had forgotten, thanks Amy, that's also a direct link right there to our chapter website. Notice the caveat there, it's only accessible, it's only viewable through Guilderland domains. So you have to be logged into a guilderlandschools.net Gmail account in order to see that website. You might say, why, right? The National Honor Society, character, scholarship, leadership, and service. We want to foster those 4 pillars right from the start. So as much as we appreciate families and parents helping and pushing students along as you so often have to do, right, to do something, we really want to see the initiative on the part of the student if they're trying to get into the National Honor Society, right? So trust me, they will be able to see it as long as they're logged into their Guilderland account. If you want to see it, say, pull up the National Honor Society website, right? But if you just try to go to that link, it's not going to be accessible to you. We want the student to do that, right? We want them to advocate for themselves. I think that's it. Is there another one? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So again, I know that was a lot of information, but are there any specific questions? Yes. Good question. That's actually a national rule. We have to count everything. We can't exclude any classes. And it has to be unweighted, so everything is counted the same. Yep. Yes. So on our chapter website, there is a link to instructions on how to set up that account. Yes, if they go to that link, students frequently email us too to be like, hey, I'm trying to get information about National Honor Society. We'll send them the link and say, hey, we recommend you bookmark it for future reference. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Great question. Do you mean like how many get in or how many end up completing all the requirements by the time they graduate? Because those are 2 different questions. Maybe both. Typically, average, Guilderland graduates every year, what, 350, 360-ish? When we get our candidate list every January, there's usually well over 150 students on it. I have my own thoughts about that number being 90 or above, but I digress for right now. How many students who end up getting into the National Honor Society actually complete the requirements? If you graduate as a member of the National Honor Society, they consider you a member for life. It is usually, of the students that get in, I would say over 90%, make it all the way to the end, do those 40 hours of community service, uphold the 4 pillars, right? You also, yeah, thank you, Amy. You also have to maintain your GPA, right? So if you get into National Honor Society and all of a sudden that GPA dips below a 90, you're going to hear from me being like, hey, your GPA is no longer above that threshold. So we do find overall that students who end up being accepted as members of the National Honor Society, they do end up completing all the requirements because it's a commitment.
Jared, thank you. And Jared will hang around to answer questions when we're done, hopefully.
Excellent. Yeah, I can
Okay.
hang out. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And in this area, we don't have a lot of independent trade schools. We are very fortunate to have Hudson Valley, though, who has taken over that role of helping students learn many different trades. So next we're going to hear from Mark Taylor from Hudson Valley to talk about trades. Thank you.
Yeah, let's give it for everyone because they're doing a great job. Let's start with, how many of you know what a hammer is? Awesome, a few of you, good. Screwdriver, great. What about the good old Little Mermaid thingamajob? Thingamajob, wasn't that what the one, whatchamacallit, sorry, whatchamacallit. So, we for the longest time thought that, it was simply using some tools, and it was what we called a trade. We are now at a point where so much technology, so much is technical, that we even don't call it trades anymore at Hudson Valley. We actually call it applied technologies. Now, if you talk to the department heads and you use the word trade, you will get yelled at, i.e. me. If you are you and you were to come and talk to the department head and you were to use the word trades, they would smile and be nice and say, yes, I'll answer whatever questions you have. So today, so I don't get in any more trouble, I am going to call it applied technologies as well. You are welcome to continue calling it trades, but due to all the technology, it does make sense why we call our programs applied technologies. So thank you for doing this with me. I want to remind you that Hudson Valley offers 3 different schools. One is our School of Business and Liberal Arts. Our second one is the School of Health Sciences, and our last one is our STEM school. And so to break down our STEM school, on the next slide, we have our sciences in the middle, our computers and math, and then on the right side, we have our engineering and manufacturing. On the left side, we have our applied technology. So I'm going to quickly go through those so you have a sense of what we offer at Hudson Valley, but what, of course, other schools may offer as well. At Hudson Valley, you can either do a 1-year certificate or a 2-year program. We use the term program, not major. All 3 auto selections are programs. They're all 2-year programs. So we have our automotive technical services. So if you wanted to work on the engines or work on anything like that, repairing things, breaking them down, fixing them, that is that. The technical services of auto body. You get into auto body, you do the exterior. And then electric and autonomous vehicles. So now, again, as we know, more and more technology. So we're giving people the chance to start learning those systems. Our next one offers a 1-year for the construction certificate. And then our 2-year is construction technology. The first year of construction technology is the same as the construction certificate. You are learning to build a house, pretty much. You're working with a little bit of everything, electrical and a little bit of plumbing, a little bit of everything. If you continue with the technology, you are working more into getting into the civil and the architecture a little bit to truly understand, again, the technologies behind construction. We do have our HVAC program, our heating, air conditioning, refrigeration, technical services. That is a 2-year program. And then this is a very big one for us. This is a very popular program, the electrical. So we have our 1-year certificate, which is the overhead electric line worker, and then we have our electrical construction and maintenance. Similar to the construction, the overhead certificate is the first year of the electrical construction and maintenance. And then you would take that second year to, again, work on the maintenance of systems that people work on. National Grid is huge for us, so they're appreciative whether you leave with the certificate or the program. And lastly, we have our welding certificate and welding and fabrication. Once again, welding certificate is welding and fabrication, the first year is the same as the welding certificate, but then you are working more with the fabrication, which means you are working more with the technologies. Because welding nowadays is not just about you holding that flame thingy and burning things and melting things. You're not doing that. You're doing much more than that. You're working with computer systems now. You're, again, making sure that you're setting the right, sorry? No, not voltage, but the right procedures, if you will, on the machines themselves to do the welding as well. So all of that. So in general, those are our 5 main ones. And so just for HVCC's sake, we look for 1 math for the majority of them, the algebra or the geometry or the algebra 2, with only the construction technologies. That's the only one that requires 2 maths, but everything else requires 1. And it has to be at least a C, and then your overall GPA has to be a 70 or higher. Now, one of the many things when we visit schools, here or even right in Albany. My child goes to BOCES. Can they, now that they've done that, can they do 1 year of your 2-year program because they did BOCES? And our answer is no. It's great that people do the CTE or the BOCES classes. We love that. That just means they're having a better base for when they come to us. But we also have students who have been in honor societies, who have these 90, 95 GPAs, and they want to work with their hands, but they didn't do any of these classes. And we say, great, come on over, because they still want to do things. And again, based on the technologies they're using, they're able to apply them that much more. The one thing that we try to kind of push away is, I'm one of the dumb ones, so I can do a trade now. And that's absolutely false. Whether you are scoring in the 60s for a GPA or the 90s, you can equally get a great education for doing an applied technology. And anyway, BOCES or CTE that are done, those credits are not transferable. You start fresh. We normally brag about a 19-to-1 student ratio. I'm going to brag even more for our applied technologies. You're looking at 16-to-1 on most of them, or 14-to-1 in welding. And then, a lot of the time people think, oh, I can get my academic support if I need to do math or, do better on an essay. But that's not true. Again, people have to work with wiring and need help with the practice sometimes of understanding that, or things in the books. So we still offer plenty of student support, whether it's a true hands-on type of class or whether it's a math class. One of the things I love about the applied technologies is that we have these different job fairs that come through. So I don't know if it's every end of semester or every end of year, but we have different, whether it's private companies, if it's an electrician, if it's J.R. Ryder's Electrical or National Grid, they come. And as long as the students do well, I can't sit here and guarantee you a job, but I have not heard of one person who's left Hudson Valley without a job. So they're very much in demand. All these programs are very much in demand. And so if you as a student or you as parents here have your students who have interest, they come, please know that they're going to be making more money than me within 2 years. And so that's it for me. What can I answer for you? Please. So 2-year programs would have associates of applied science or occupational science, depending on the program. So the majority of our applied technology programs are not truly meant to transfer into a 4-year program. But that being said, I learned recently in HVAC, for example, that students who have gotten their associates there, there are certain schools, unfortunately not here in nearby New York, but like there's one in, I think it was Michigan, and then there's one in Florida. Like if they wanted to go and do kind of the engineering behind like the systems, they can go on to get an engineering degree or like a bachelor's in HVAC technology. So there are schools out there, and the professors know about them. That's the good thing. I don't know enough about facilities management to answer that. We don't offer hospitality, and another one that people love is culinary, and unfortunately we don't offer that either. Yes, yes, Schenectady does. Yep. Yep. Any other questions? All right, thank you for giving me the time. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, Mark will be around to answer any questions if people have individual questions that they didn't want to ask in the last group. Last but not least, we're going to talk about financial aid. I know that's everybody's favorite subject. We kind of have people who love it and people who are freaked out by it, so we're going to talk about it tonight to try to help allay people's fears. We have Joe Esposito and Ray Torres, and I shortened your names. I'm sorry if you go by your long names, from UAlbany to talk about financial aid.
All right, so really quickly, well, thanks, Joe. Yep. Really quickly, I'm Ray Torres. I'm the Assistant Director of Federal Compliance and Financial Aid. This is my supervisee, Joe Esposito. Our job here is to quickly, very quickly, give you a 200-year lesson on financial aid in about 10 seconds. So, first and foremost, at the time of this presentation, all the information is accurate based on this year. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. But we all know in January starts a new presidency, and there is a lot of speculation and talk going on and different things going away. So at this time, everything is staying the same. It may change. So I may turn around and be made a liar tonight. Who knows what's going to happen in a month or so, but hey, it's okay. We're going to talk about baseline stuff. So again, we're going to give you some baseline information on gaining knowledge and understanding about financial aid. But again, I have to say the presentation and the company information are accurate as of the specified time today based on the new presidency coming in. It may change at any point. I'm going to go ahead. This is Joe's first presentation outside of high school. He's one of my new employees. So I'm going to let him take away, and we're going to kind of co-anchor this together. So Joe, take it away.
Yeah, sure. So the job of financial aid at university is to make college, the college experience, whatever it might be, more accessible to everyone and anyone that it can. Most kinds of financial aid are based on financial need, and what determines that need, at least on the federal side of things, is the free application for federal student aid. Link there is studentaid.gov, and that's where you can find information on federal loans as well as the FAFSA. Alongside federal aid, there's also state aid available through the New York State Grant and Scholarship application. It's called the TAP application, as well as the Excelsior application. Some other forms of financial aid might be the academic or athletic ability, although that sits in the institutional or outside kind of scholarship area. So some different types of aid. Primarily we have the kind of the free money scholarships, those scholarships that you get, you don't necessarily have to pay back, and that would be through the Pell Grant, the TAP Grant, and the Excelsior Scholarship in most cases. Some self-help aid would be through federal work study, which is a federal allocation that goes to students who have the need for it, for them to work on campus and earn that aid, or through federal loans. Located on the bottom here are various sources, so federal, state, government, college, institutional, maybe your high school could also give you grants. So as I said, the FAFSA constitutes your federal financial aid. You can actually kind of start this process right now by going to federalstudentaid.gov and creating an FSA ID, essentially an account. Both a parent and a student are required to make one, and file your free application for federal student aid within that aid year. So typically an aid year, at least for our institution, goes from fall, ends in the summer. So currently we're in 24-25. If your student is planning on attending in the future, kind of look out for the specific aid year. Contributors? We skip them?
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump up for a quick talk about
Yeah.
contributors. A big thing that you're gonna hear over the next few years is what is a contributor. Now, we've used to hear parent. We're always knowing parent, parent, parent. The FAFSA, and this could change again, they now consider the person who is contributing to that student's education, who the person is living with, who is contributing more than 50% to that student's livelihood is now the contributor. So mom, you may have the student living with you, but dad's paying 100% of the bills on things like the FAFSA. The contributor would be the dad. So we're gonna skip a lot of it. There's a lot of information. You guys will get the presentation, but just realize that term you're gonna hear a lot of is called the contributor. And go ahead,
Yeah,
Jim.
I think we're skipping that. Yeah, that one.
Those are just common questions.
Yeah, common questions we typically get. And what's this? So, back on the FAFSA, how do we kind of determine needs? So you might have heard in the past the term EFC being thrown around a little bit. That was thrown out completely by the Department of Ed. We now go off of the SAI, or the Student Aid Index, which is a calculation made that determines need. The most needy populations have a SIA of about negative 1,500. Doesn't go any lower than that. As you kind of collect income, that goes up. That's one way that we determine how much a student gets in that federal pool there. So that Pell Grant, as well as those loans. The maximum Pell you can receive is about $7,395. Minimum is about $740. Another allocation there is the federal direct loans, which are elective. You can decide to accept them or decline them. It's up to you. The loan amounts do increase over time. So a student coming in will get $5,500, and that could be split between subsidized loans or unsubsidized loans, which are two different kinds of loans offered to students, subsidized being the more need-based loan. Its interest is subsidized by the government up until about 6 months after you graduate. Same interest rate on those. So what tax year to use? So generally, rule of thumb, if you're going to school in fall of 2026 at our institution, just for example, you'd want to be completing the fall 26-27 FAFSA. That's going to look at 2 years prior. So 2 years prior to the beginning of the aid year is the tax kind of year that's going to be looking at. If it's drastically changed, we can do what's called a special circumstance or professional judgment, and kind of look at how that change occurred. It does have to occur somewhat timely, so either more recently or closer to the time we're looking at that aid. If it's something from 2019, we really can't go that far back and make a judgment there. If you cannot provide your parents information because they refuse, or you have an unusual circumstance, you might want to contact us. The other side of the coin, in New York State, you have access to state financial aid, so that can be available through HESC. It's a different website, so Federal Student Aid for FAFSA, HESC, HESC for state aid. That includes the TAP grant and the Excelsior Scholarship. Quick note, so if you're going to a SUNY school like SUNY Albany, you can actually make use of SUNY tuition credit, which is kind of a bonus amount of funding that you can get there towards your education. I think down there I have some other scholarships. No, you're good. Other kind of information put in there, but you can take a picture of that if you need to, or check the... Yeah, it'll be posted. There you go.
You're going to get all this information.
Yes. So Excelsior Scholarship, it's a little bit confusing sometimes, but it is considered a last dollar scholarship. And so what that means is it can only pay tuition last. Other grants like the TAP grant, Tuition Assistance Program, which can only pay tuition as well, and the Pell Grant can reduce Excelsior. So you might be able to be eligible for Excelsior. It might pay to your account for the amount of $0.00 because your Pell and TAP are kind of covering that cost of tuition. Tuition being, at least our institution, $3,535. So if your Pell and your TAP exceed that amount, you may still get Excelsior just for $0.00. I like to think of it a little bit like padding or a little bit of insurance. If you can expect to make more money in the next 2 years, whatever it might be, than a previous term, you can expect your aid to either increase or decrease. Excelsior can usually fill that gap there. So if you are eligible for it, try to maintain as much eligibility for that as you can. New York State DREAM Act is a way of students who have maybe undocumented citizenship status to obtain the actual TAP award there. So that's another avenue there. For institutional aid and scholarships, as I said, you might want to check our additional scholarships page. We offer different kinds of scholarships, different applications. If your student is an athlete or your son or daughter is an athlete, that would be one way to obtain additional aid. I know students in our marching band program, there's aid available for them, and recently even the esports program that we've just started, you can also obtain aid from that. Flagship match, real quick. So we will try to match the cost generally of another state's flagship institution. We are flagship 50, so that is covering all 50 states. So if you're coming in from New Jersey, we'll take a look at the cost of the flagship university there, and we'll try to provide you an amount of aid to make the cost similar there. Students who are out of state coming into our institution are charged a little bit more there. So, a little bit more. So the flagship match can certainly come in handy there. And then some external scholarships are located down there. I don't know if they're blocked, but yeah, it's fine. That's all right.
We have them all posted on our website also.
Right. All right. So as far as bridging the gap, outside of making out-of-pocket payments within your means, another type of federal loan exists called a Parent Plus loan. So parents of students can fill out an application and essentially take out more federal loans, again, at a I'd say safer interest rate than a lot of what you'll find out in the kind of private vendor sphere. It does come with a little bit of an increased interest rate, floating around about 8 or 9, is it 9%? I think now. Yeah, about 9% right now. Those undergraduate unsubsidized and subsidized are sitting around 6. But regardless, it's another option for parents to take out additional loans for their student. If for whatever reason you can't fill out the PLUS application, let's say your parents are not citizens, we can actually do another professional judgment there and actually increase the amount of loans a student would receive, the unsubsidized loans. On top of that, we also have payment plans. So different universities do theirs in different ways. We'll take your balance and divide it by 4, and you can kind of pay it in 4 installments there. Student employment off and on campus. So federal work study is kind of a need-based grant as part of the financial aid package. Doesn't mean regular students can't work on campus who are not receiving federal work study, but certain positions are specifically work study. So that's just another type of aid there. If you are a veteran, be sure to check with our Dean of Veterans office to try and take advantage of those. And then also private alternative loans are there as an option as well. So financial aid packages will include direct costs, it will include indirect costs, it will include award eligibility and your estimated costs. So that's listed there as well. But generally when you receive your bill, it'll all be listed on there, the cost for each. How much does each school cost? So we are required to have our costs posted. Currently we're sitting at about, I can't read very well, but $27,124 for fall and spring. So that's split across both semesters. If you're expecting to get financial aid, it can actually cover quite a bit of that, but financial aid will never really give you that full ride, unless of course you have a, unless you're quite the athlete. But it can certainly come in and help bridge that gap there. And again, that is for both fall and spring. Cost of tuition, at least at our university, is $3,535. And you can see the difference there between out-of-state residents and New York State residents. Purple?
That's my turn. All right, guys, give it up for Joe. Come on, that was great. Good job. I'm the long-winded one. I'm the one who'll take a half hour to talk about 5 different things. He could do it in 8.5 minutes. So my thing is, as a compliance officer, I have to make sure the University at Albany, our financial aid office, remains in compliance. One of the compliance things that you will hear as you're starting your process to go to school with your student, and I say parents, you're going to go to school with your student because it's going to happen, is FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Once a student starts at a higher institution of learning, FERPA kicks into play, which is a federal law. It means that student's record becomes locked. It is their record. We are not required to have a conversation with the parent anymore. We are not required to give any information out to the parents unless the student gives us authority to do so. So as you're starting the process and you're starting to have conversations with schools, starting to have conversations with financial aid office, like what projections you're going to see as your student in 2 years is going to start going to school, make sure you understand in the back of your head that once they start school, you're going to have that student sign a waiver in order for us to speak to you, or I'm going to have a copy of your tax return right in front of me. 90% of the time, I will have your tax return in front of me because there are things like federal verification, or there's special circumstance that we have to look at information to help you fund that college education. So not only is it a great thing about getting into school, it is about paying for school. And you see Albany with housing and everything up to $27,000. Some schools are up in the 50s, 60s, almost $100,000 a year. So now is the time for you to start preparing yourself mentally, saying, hey, what do I need to do? That 529 is going to come into play. That, that veteran, you may be a veteran. First off, thank you for your service, because without you, I would not be here. But also, do you have benefits you're going to transfer to your student? Start talking to the VCOs now, the Veteran Certifying Officials. Start talking to your representatives and the Veteran Affairs Office to see what benefits you can transfer to your student. But know that once school starts, that regulation kicks into play. And the next one. Another thing you're going to hear a lot now, we've talked about Honor Society. As a lifetime member, I am from Junior Honor Society and National Honor Society. Graduated 7th in my class from Cara Durham, woohoo, many, many, many years ago. It's all about your academic progress. So not only is it really smart to really push your students now and say, hey, academics in high school are super important because it's going to help you get into those college. My nephew goes to Sage, absolutely loves it, is so happy to be there, and in high school knew had to kick butt when they graduated that they were going to get some good scholarships to go to school there. So I am happy to say, Vinny is at Sage. Friends who go to UAlbany. It is really important to push your students now to do well academically, and also start working and saving money in case you're a family, maybe a low-income family who doesn't have the means to pay a large bill in the college. Start with the employment now. But a key thing you also want to stress to them is satisfactory academic progress. In order to maintain scholarships, in order to maintain federal student aid and state aid and the Excelsior Scholarship, a student is required to maintain satisfactory academic progress. Every school has their own policy. At the University at Albany, we work on a little bit of a tier system. So not only are they required to have a certain GPA, they are required to maintain a certain pace and also stay within what's called a 150% rule, meaning they can attempt 150% of their credits in their required program. So we require 120 credits to graduate from UAlbany, but a student can have up to 180 credits that they can attempt, maybe not be successful in them, but they can attempt before we say, too bad, can't have aid anymore. So that's a key thing, is the academics is really important. So taking those AP courses, taking any college and high school. There's a lot of programs where you're taking college courses. Start preparing now. Think of ways to help your student save. If your high school has a program, or they're doing stuff through UAlbany, or they're doing stuff maybe through SUNY Orange or Hudson Valley. I'm friends with the director of financial aid over at Hudson Valley. I can get you all that information over there too. Look into those things to help cut that cost down. But as you're doing, maintaining good grades, going to class, making sure, and stay on top of them. Talk with our academic advisors, as long as you sign that FERPA and the student lets you talk to them, so you know what's going on. So we have our SAP policy on our website. Every institution has a SAP policy that they follow, but scholarships are really important. It is not just about the college giving you money to go to school. It is also about your high school, your honor societies. It's also about, maybe you're a member of the Elks Lodge. I was a proud member of the Middletown Elks Lodge, and we gave out scholarships all the time. Leave no stone unturned. Check with your employer. I had a student once who got the Coca-Cola scholarship when no one thought it was a legit scholarship. That student was like, oh, one student out of 1 million people, a good $20,000. I'm like, oh, okay, well, fine.
That's a full ride.
That's basically a full ride at some schools. So leave no stone unturned. Next, please. If you have any questions, do not be afraid at this point to contact the financial aid office and just have a conversation. Understand, Joe used a lot of great terms tonight. Subsidize. What does subsidize means? It means the interest is being subsidized by the federal government. I look at it this way. When I eat a sub, I'm full, I'm happy, so sub, happy. That one's not accruing interest while you're in school. But the opposite of happy is unsubsidized, unhappy, sad. That one's accruing interest while you're in school. Also, Joe used the term professional judgment. There are times in which maybe this year, we'll say you're going to school just say you have a kid in school now, and all of a sudden you lost your job. But we're looking 2 years prior and you made $1 million. And guess what? You're not getting anything but a loan. But all of a sudden now you've lost your job. We have the right as professionals to use professional judgment, to use different tax years. So like 2022 was our baseline year. Well, something happened in 2023 that's affecting 2024. I could say, give me your 2023 taxes. I'm going to use that where you made nothing. That student go from an unsub loan to full Pell eligibility. Or in some cases, New York State can do the same thing. Maybe a parent passed away. I hate to say it, but sometimes it happens. Or maybe there's a divorce. Not everybody gets along, so parents may divorce. But remember, that contributor, hint, hint, who's providing more than 50% support for that parent, or even 100%, you're going to use that contributor on the FAFSA. So we can use things to make those professional judgments to change numbers. And it's all documented, it's all here, but ask us questions. We're happy to sit down with you. You can go on and use the FAFSA estimator, just look at stuff now and kind of say, oh, my income's gonna stay the same in 2 years. Let me see what it would be. Well, let me talk to the financial aid office. Don't go divorcing your spouse now. Don't do that. I mean, if you do, that's up to you, but you're gonna come back and I'm gonna say, well, you're not married at that time, I don't care. You know, it's what's on paper. And a lot of times families always say, hey, on paper, I make $1 million, but I'm only bringing home $29.95. Unfortunately, I got to go by what's on paper. So, a lot of things covered tonight. The presentation is going to be sent out to you guys. Please feel free to ask. As someone who has been doing this for 15 years, I left doing hair and makeup for theater. That's why when someone was talking about theater earlier, I was like, hey, look at me. Then all of a sudden, it was like, oh, financial aid, wow. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Yes, it's called your mattress, shove the money underneath. No, honestly, it's going to depend. I cannot make a comment on that with the new administration because we know the administration saying they're going to get rid of the Department of Education. But under the Higher Education Authorization Act, it's actually going to take a huge power than the president in order to do that because there's a lot of laws that are in place. So the best thing is start putting that I could recommend. Hide money not hide money, but, put money aside, hide money, You could put money in different savings account, put them in 529s. Those are not going anywhere. Also look at state-backed programs. Like there are some state-backed accounts that you can look at in order to save money because if the department goes away and you're losing, we're not going to lose the Pell Grant. Don't get that. We're not going to lose that. There's no way. That's in the Higher Education Authorization Act. There is no way that's going away. But you might see some changes in loans. You might see, or the Pell Grant would now be at the state level. That's really what they're trying to do is de-departmentalize the Department of Education to then put it back to the state. So we would be responsible of determining a student's eligibility. They'll just give us the money. So things like your 529. Open up a high yield savings account. Maybe start putting something in under your mattress, something like that. But also remember that when you're looking at the FAFSA, those assets that you have may or may not count. And every year it changes where you may have to report what's in your cash savings and checking. You may have to report if a 529 is in the student's name, you have to report that. But if it's in grandparents' name, you don't have to report it. There's a lot of little intricacies going on there. Best is just start saving. And if you haven't saved, it's okay. We will do our best to help you the way we can. That's a really great question. Next question. Next victim. No, that's it? Wow, okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Good job. Good job, Joe.
Please, let's give another round of applause for all of our presenters. They did a fabulous job. I want to thank you all for coming out. I also want to mention that all of the counselors are here also, if you'd like to talk with them. I don't have my glasses on, but Karen Murphy, Candace Galerno, Lynn Baumgartner, Ashley Kaplan, and Jen Lunetta, who you may not have met yet. We're all here if you have questions. One of the reasons we wanted to do this tonight was because students are starting to talk about courses for next year, and we are going to be meeting with everybody, all of your kids, in January to talk about their courses. So we thought we'd give you some food for thought so you could go home and have conversations with your kids about, well, what are you thinking you might want to do? And are there electives you can pursue? Or if you're interested in I already forgot the term, applied technology. I have the career in CTE down. I'm going to get the applied technology down. Anyway, maybe you want to consider CTE or thinking about financial aid. So we tried to give you enough information to go home and have those conversations so that when we meet in January, students might have a better idea of what they want to do. Okay? So thank you all very much for coming, and we're all around for questions if you have any.